My name is Vada Fennimore. I am 47. There was a real estate lockbox hanging on the handrail of a house I own. My father was 11 feet away at the kitchen table, in his robe, eating oatmeal. Through the wall, Mrs. Silverthorne had her kettle on. She is 81. The back of that building has been her home for 31 years. The flyer in the box on the post said cash. It said, as is. Between them, in capital letters, it said, vacant. My mother came out and put her hand flat on my back. Nobody is being put out, Vada, she said. I folded the flyer into eighths and went down to the driveway wall to count the meters. There are 3. That lockbox came off the handrail 15 days later because of a drawing the size of a napkin. Welcome back to Porch Stories, where the woman who writes down what is really in a building finally gets it written where it stays. $262,975, and my mother is the one who signed the paper it was printed on, in her own name. Nobody at that brokerage asked her for a deed. I walk houses for a living, 4,000 of them, give or take. The price was for the front half. The back half, where a woman has lived for 31 years, they had written down as storage. Hit subscribe if you are staying, because the thing that undid all of it was already bolted to that driveway wall while I stood there reading. Let me take you back to 2009 and a 2-family house on Dorset Street that nobody else wanted. I was 30. My father's hip had gone. The place my parents were renting had a staircase in it that was going to kill him, and the rent there had gone up twice in 1 year, the way rent does when a landlord has decided to sell. The house on Dorset Street had a dead furnace and a raccoon in the crawl space, and a back unit with a woman in it whose rent nobody had raised since her husband died. It had been on the market 11 months. I walked it on a Saturday in February, with my coat on the whole time, because the heat was off and my breath was showing in the front bedroom. I bought it. My name went on the deed because it was my loan, my down payment, my credit, my signature at the closing table with a pen that had a bank's name on it. My mother told it differently from the first week. Your name is on it for financing, she said, to my aunt, at the kitchen table, while I was standing at the sink. That is all that is. I let it go. You let a lot go at 30 when your father is finally sleeping on one floor. Last October, there was a woman from my mother's church at that table, a new widow, and my mother was giving her the tour of her circumstances the way she does. She said, "We've got the whole front, and Simeon, that's my husband, he's got no stairs, and the girl in the back keeps to herself. The girl in the back is 81. My mother is 73. The woman from church asked, very politely, whether they owned or rented. It is the question people ask each other at that age, and it is not a rude question, and everybody at that table knew the answer. My mother said, Vada's name is on it for financing. I was sitting 4 feet away with a fork in my hand. My father looked at his plate. My sister Marlena kept eating. Nobody in that kitchen was startled, and what I did was reach for the potatoes. I have gone over that minute 100 times since. I could have said one sentence. I bought this house. 5 words at a Sunday table. I did not say it because I did not want to be a woman who says that at a Sunday table with my father right there. So I let it go, the way I let it go in 2009, and every year after, and every time I let it go, it got a little more true in that room. I walk into a building I have never been in, and I write down what is in it. That is the job. Not whether it is nice, not what it is worth. What is there? How many rooms? How they are heated? Where the water comes in? What the panel says? Whether the beam over the stairs is doing anything, or just resting. And then a stranger who was never in that building reads my paper and decides something with money in it. My mother has a word for this. She tells people I look at houses. The first year I did it, I inspected a bungalow for a young couple who had a baby coming. Nice house, good roof. The bank had a report on it that said 3 bedrooms, and the price on the paper was a 3-bedroom price. The 3rd bedroom had no window and no heat register. There was a chest freezer against its door. Whoever wrote that report had walked the hall, counted doorways, and never turned a knob. I wrote down what was there. 2 bedrooms, and a room off the hall with no heat in it and no window to get out of. The wife cried in the driveway. The husband asked me, twice, in 2 different ways, whether I could put it the other way. And I understood the question, and I said no. A description is a price. I told that at my father's table the next Sunday, because I was 25 and I thought I had done something. My mother heard the end of it and said, "Well, you certainly enjoy being the one who ruins things for people." My sister laughed. It was said in the voice you laugh at. I have been in 4,000 houses since, and I have never brought another one to that table. I carried the same thing into that bungalow that I carry into all of them. A flat aluminum case with a spring clip on the outside and forms inside the lid, dented on one corner. The latch stiff enough that you open it with your thumb. I call it the field box. It smells like pencil lead and cold metal, which is the smell of about to start. I set it on a stair tread, and I write standing up, and people relax when I do it, because a woman with a case is a professional and not a relative. The last place I ever set that box down was a counter in a courthouse basement. Now, the building. Dorset Street is 2 family houses, mostly, put up in 1926 for men who worked at the tannery. Every one of them was built with 2 homes in it, 2 front doors under 1 porch roof, 2 kitchens, 2 baths, 1 basement, 1 furnace room, 1 driveway down the side, and on the driveway wall of mine, at shoulder height, bolted into the brick, are 3 electric meters, 1 for the front, 1 for the back, 1 little one for the porch light and the basement and the hall. Anybody who has ever walked down that driveway has passed within arm's reach of them. The mailman, the oil man, my sister, my mother, 4,000 times. Mrs. Silverthorne walks down it on the 3rd of every month with an envelope in her hand, because she will not put rent in a mailbox. She gives it to my mother at the side door, and my mother writes her a receipt on a pad from the hardware store, and says the same thing every time. "You didn't have to come all the way round, Petronella." She has said that on the 3rd of the month for 17 years, standing 3 feet from 3 meters. In 2019, I had the service upgraded. That is not a story. It is a Tuesday, Mrs. Silverthorne's window unit was tripping the old panel every July, and the old panel was 100 amps for a whole building, which was a lot in 1926 and is not a lot now. I pulled the permit in my own name. The electrician put in 200 amps and a new panel with a proper label card. The county inspector came out, looked at it, signed the final, and the card went in the file at the county the way it does. 100 amps to 200. It is in a drawer at the county building with my name on the applicant line. The afternoon they finished it, my mother stood in that driveway with her hands in her cardigan pockets, 3 feet from the meters, and told the neighbor across the street that I had gone and spent all that money on the tenant. I was on the porch. I heard her say it. The neighbor looked at his shoes. I did that so an old woman could run a window unit in July. Let me tell you about the old woman. Mrs. Silverthorne, Petronella Silverthorne, the tenant in the back unit, came to Dorset Street the year I turned 16. Her husband painted bridges for the state. He died in the back bedroom on a Sunday morning, and she washed the sheets herself that afternoon because she said she was not going to have anybody else's hands on them. The slot on the back mailbox still has his name under hers, in her handwriting, on a strip of tape gone the color of weak tea. She pays her rent on the 3rd. She has never once been late. She hangs sheets on a line in April because she says the dryer takes the smell out of them. Her rooms smell like lemon oil and wool-a-woman with time, spending all of it on the same 4 things. And she has one appointment. At 1 o'clock on Saturdays, there is a call-in gardening program on the radio. My father listens to it in the front unit, and she listens to it in the back, on opposite sides of a wall built in 1926, both of them with the volume up. When the host says something foolish about tomatoes, she knocks twice on the wall. My father knocks twice back. They have done this since before my mother's hair went white. That is it. That is the whole thing. 1 hour, once a week, 2 people who never eat a meal together and would not know what to say if they did. 31 years in those rooms, and 1 hour on the calendar. In 2019, my father had the second hip done, and I sat in a surgical waiting room and did the arithmetic that people do in surgical waiting rooms. I was 42. I owned one building and drove a truck with 180,000 miles on it. If something happened to me, that building would go where things go, and it would be sold, and two people who had nowhere else to be would find out about it from a stranger. So I put the building in a trust. Not a rich person's trust, a boring one, drawn up by a woman in a strip mall office next to a nail salon. $400. It says I am the trustee. It says what the building is for. And it has one sentence in the middle of it that took 2 visits, because the woman drawing it up kept handing me the version people usually ask for, and I kept sending it back. On the second visit, she stopped typing and turned around in her chair and asked me whether I was expecting somebody to try something. I said no. I said I was expecting to die first. She looked at me for a second, and then she put that sentence in and read it back to me twice, and I drove home with it on the passenger seat. I gave my mother a copy at the kitchen table the following Sunday because it was her home and she had a right to see the paper that governed it. She read the whole thing, 6 pages. It took her a long time, and she used her finger. Then she squared it up on the table and said, "Well, you've certainly been busy," and asked whether anybody wanted more coffee. She did not ask me one question about it. A woman who reads 6 pages with her finger is not a woman who failed to understand them. I did not put my mother's name in it. I told myself that was because she is married to my father, and my father's room is her room, and that is true. It is true, and it is not the only reason. My sister is Marlena Trelawney. She is 4 years older. She does deals, that is her word. She finds people who have to sell a house fast, and she signs a paper saying she will buy it, and then she finds somebody else to actually buy it, and she takes money for standing in the middle. She never owns anything, and she never means to. It is legal, and plenty of people do it. She has been at it 11 years, and the part she is good at is the part where she talks to people who are frightened. If you have ever been the one in the family who pays for a thing and then hears somebody else explain it, tell me in the comments what they call it. Mine called it financing. The first Tuesday in March, I was in a crawl space on the other side of the county with a flashlight in my teeth. There is no signal down there, which is normal. I came up filthy and drove to Dorset Street to drop off my father's prescription. There was a lockbox on the handrail. You have to understand that I had no category for it. A lockbox is a thing I see every working day. I have opened 4,000 of them. My hand actually went out toward it, the way your hand goes toward a doorknob in your own house in the dark, and then it stopped in the air. The plastic flyer box screwed to the porch post was new too. Somebody had put 4 screws through my post. The flyers inside were still warm from a car. $262,975. Cash. As is. Vacant. 1,180 square feet, it said. And I stood there on my own porch with a pharmacy bag in one hand and read it 3 times. Because 1,180 is the front unit. 1,180 is what you get if you go in the front door and turn around and go back out. My building is 1,940. Behind me, through the door, I could hear the spoon in my father's bowl. My mother came out onto the porch, and she had her cardigan buttoned wrong, and she looked at the flyer in my hand, and she did not look surprised for even a quarter of a second. "Nobody is being put out, Vada," she said. I folded the flyer into 8ths and went down to the driveway wall to count the meters. There were 3, the way there have been 3 since 1926. I stood in front of them long enough that the neighbor's dog came to the fence. Then I went inside and asked my father what the man with the tape measure had been doing 3 weeks ago. "Oh," he said, "that fella? He was pleasant. He asked if he could see the kitchen, and I said, 'The kitchen's right here.' He took his pictures. He asked what was through the door, and I said, 'Storage, mostly,' and he said that's fine. He was out in 20 minutes. He said I had a nice level floor. Through the door is Mrs. Silverthorne's kitchen." My father is 78, and he was not lying, and he was not being careless. He was being what he has always been, which is a man who does not think he is entitled to ask a stranger with a clipboard what the paperwork is for. I did not shout. That is not restraint. That is the thing I do instead of feeling something in a room. I did not say anything at all for about 4 seconds. What I did with those 4 seconds was put the pharmacy bag on the counter and line it up square with the edge, which is a thing I do. My father watched me do it. Then I asked my mother to sit down and tell me what she had signed. She would not sit. She stood with her hand on the back of the chair. She had signed a listing agreement, she said, in her own name, because somebody had to, and she is the one who lives here. It was going to be handled properly. Nobody was being put out. I asked to see her copy. She said my sister had it. 6 days went by between that Tuesday and the following Monday. None of it was detective work. It was a woman making 4 phone calls with her ears hot. The first one was to the brokerage. I drove over there ready for a fight and got handed 60 pages instead. Her name is Pomona, and she is the listing agent whose name was on the sign. She is maybe 35. Her office smells like carpet glue and cold coffee. I sat down and put the field box on my knees and said, I own the building at Dorset Street, and my mother has listed it, and I would like to see the file. She asked me for my name. She typed it. She turned her monitor about 10 degrees away from me, which I noticed, and then she turned it back and said the thing that decided how the next week went. You are the owner of record, she said. This is your file. I will print all of it. Then she said, and she said it looking at me and not at the screen, I met your mother twice. She had a folder of rent receipts in her own handwriting going back to the year you bought it, she said, and a driver's license with this address on it. And the tax bill comes here. I asked her the question, and she answered it. I asked what the question was. Whether anyone was living in the property, she said. She told me her husband was in the front, and the back was storage. The agent printed 60 pages and handed them across the desk. She did not charge me for them. She did not ask me to leave when I stayed in her lobby chair for 20 minutes reading them. She did the one thing that was hers to do, which was hand the owner her own file. Then, she took it up to her broker. I never learned that man's name. That is where it sat, in an office I have never been in, while 2 more Saturdays came, and my father packed a bag by the door out of politeness, and an 81-year-old woman sat in a parking lot. A thing does not have to be hidden to sit still. It only has to belong to somebody whose week it is not. The listing sheet was on top. 1 bedroom, 1 bath, 1,180 square feet, 100 amp service, no tenant, immediate possession. Under remarks, in a field somebody types into, rear portion used as storage, no access. And behind it, a report with a photograph of my porch on the cover and a page in the back of it that I had to sit down for. It was a drawing, pencil and a straight edge, or a computer made to look that way, about the size of a napkin, a rectangle with a notch in it. Inside the rectangle, somebody had labeled the rooms. Living, kitchen, bed, bath. And then, across the entire back third of the building, 1 word, storage. There is no wall drawn where the wall is. There is no second kitchen. There is no second bath. There is no stairway to the second bedroom, because that stairway is behind a door that says, storage. A woman had been asleep in that rectangle for 31 years, and she is not on it. My ears went hot in a stranger's lobby, and I put my hand flat on the page the way you put your hand on a dog that is about to run into the road. I drove home and got out the 6 sheets my father had been stacking in his drawer. He cannot throw away a piece of paper. It is a thing about him. Every showing agent who came through had left a sign-in sheet on the counter, and he had squared them up and put them in the drawer under the phone book, because that is where paper goes. 6 of them. 6 different agents. 6 carloads of strangers who walked into the front unit, looked at 1,180 square feet, and left. 6 showings. Not one of those people called the owner. Not one of them opened the door that says storage. My father made 2 of them coffee. He asked me, on the phone that night, whether he ought to be getting his things together. I said no. He said, well, and then there was a silence, and he said, I put a bag by the door already. Just the shaving things and the photographs, so it's not a scramble. My father is 78 years old, and he had packed a bag out of politeness. On the Saturday, I went by at 12:30, and there was already a car at the curb I did not know. A young agent in a quilted vest was on my porch with a couple in their 30s. He was doing the thing they do, which is stand aside and let the wife go through the door first. My mother was holding the door for them with her good cardigan on. I stopped at the bottom of the steps and said nothing. I am a woman in work boots with a truck full of ladders, and everybody on that porch took me for somebody who had come about the gutters. The husband asked how old the furnace was. My mother said, "It's newer," and looked at me, and I did not help her. Then the wife did what people do in a house they might buy, which is walk to the end of a hall and put her hand on a door. It was the door at the back of the kitchen, 11 feet from the chair my father eats his oatmeal in. Behind it is a landing, and Mrs. Silverthorne's kitchen, and a woman who paints her nails on Saturdays because she has nowhere to be until Monday. My mother said, "That's just storage, honey. It's full of my husband's things." And the young man in the vest said, "Cellar's not including that," and wrote something on his clipboard, and the wife said, "Oh," and took her hand off the door and asked about the yard. 4 people stood in that hall. 3 of them had been told a true-sounding sentence and had no reason on earth to doubt it, and my mother said it in the voice you use for, "Honey, it's fine," and the door stayed shut. I have watched a lot of people not open doors. I do it for a living. I had never once, until that Saturday, watched somebody hold one closed. They were out in 20 minutes. The agent shook my mother's hand and gave her a card and told her the house showed well. I went down the side to the driveway and stood next to the meters and waited for the radio, because it was 1:10 and the radio was how I would know the world was still where I left it. The back unit was dark. I stood in the driveway next to 3 meters and looked at a dark window. Then I drove around the block twice like a fool. Then I found her car in the lot at the Lutheran church, 4 blocks over, the one they leave open. She was in the driver's seat with her handbag on her lap and the engine off, in March. She had a cardigan and a lap robe. On the passenger seat, there was a grocery bag with her husband's shaving kit and 2 photograph albums in it, and I understood in one look that she had been deciding what she could carry. I got in the passenger side. She moved the bag onto the floor to make room and apologized for it. I asked her what she was doing there. She said, "Your sister explained to me that the showings are Saturdays, and it's better if I'm not in the building." And I said I understood, and I do understand. Then she said the thing, "Your mother says nobody is being put out." She said it kindly. She was reassuring me. An 81-year-old woman sat in a cold car from noon until 2 and told me that sentence back like it was good news. She had missed 1 o'clock. On the other side of that wall, my father had knocked twice at 1:10, and nothing came back. Nobody is being put out, and one of them is sitting in a parking lot. I did not say any of that. I said, "Come home," and she said, "Is it all right?" And I said, "Yes," and she followed me back in her car, and I sat with her in her kitchen while the kettle went. Her rooms smell like lemon oil and wool, and I have never been that angry in a room that smelled that good. I had the packet in the truck. I went and got it and brought the drawing in and put it on her table, face up, next to the sugar. She has a kitchen. There is a stove in it with a burn mark on the enamel and a kettle on the burn mark. There is a sink with a window over it and a jar of wooden spoons. There is a table for 2 with 1 chair pulled out and 1 chair pushed in, and it has been pushed in since the Sunday morning her husband died. On the drawing, that room is a corner of a rectangle with 1 word across it. I put my finger on the paper and then I put my hand out sideways and touched the stove, because both of them were inside my arm's reach and I wanted to feel how close they were. She leaned over and looked at it with her glasses down her nose and asked me what it was. I said it was the drawing a man made of this building. She looked at it a long time. Then she said, "Well, he's got the porch right." She was not being funny. She was being careful, the way you are careful with a document somebody official made, because she is 81, and she comes from people who assume the paper is right, and that they are the ones who have it wrong. Her first instinct, looking at a page that had erased her kitchen, was to find the part of it that was correct. She asked me if she should be looking. That was her word. Looking. She has a niece in another state who has offered her a room with a bathroom down the hall. 31 years. And the offer on the table was a room down the hall from a bathroom. I told her she was not going anywhere and that I would show her why. And then I had to go and find the why, because at that point all I had was a drawing and a feeling, and a drawing and a feeling do not stop a Saturday. If you have ever had to prove a thing that everybody around you could see with their own eyes, tell me in the comments what it was, and hit subscribe, because the part of this that actually worked cost $10 a page. Monday, I took the report to a review appraiser named Prudence Thorncroft. The state licenses her to read other people's price reports and say whether they were done right. She works out of a converted porch with a space heater, and she has done it for 26 years. I have crossed paths with her on maybe 9 houses. I gave her the whole packet. She did not read the front. She turned straight to the back, to the drawing, and looked at it and nothing else for 10 seconds. I counted because it was uncomfortable. Then she said, "The sketch is the appraisal." She tapped it twice with 2 fingers. "Everything after this page is arithmetic performed on whatever this page says exists," she said. "And this one puts 1 kitchen in a building that has 2. I asked her whether the man had done something wrong. She said, "He wrote down what he was let into." She said it without any heat at all. Then she said, "This is the part people never believe. He was standing in the driveway when he took the front photograph. He was 11 feet from 3 meters. She turned the drawing around so it faced me. "You cannot sell a building by describing a smaller one," she said. "You can only sell it to somebody who never came and looked." Then she picked up the listing sheet and read the price out loud. The whole thing. The way you read a number when you want somebody to hear how specific it is. $262,975. "That is not a lowball," she said. "That is an honest number for the building on that page. That building does not exist." I sat in a converted porch with a space heater ticking and understood what my week actually was. Nobody had to be caught lying about the price. The price was fine. The price was the most honest thing in the whole folder. What was wrong was upstream of it, on a napkin, in pencil, in a field marked remarks. $262,975 is a fair price for a small 1-kitchen house. A cash buyer sees 6 of those in a month and does not look up from his coffee. It is not a fair price for a 2-family with an old woman's kitchen in the back of it. That price makes a title company pick up a telephone. The small number is what kept anybody from looking. Tuesday, I went to the county building and pulled the assessor's record card, which is 1 page and costs nothing and anybody may have it. 1926, 2 dwelling units, 2 kitchens, 1,940 square feet. It has said that since Calvin Coolidge, in 3 different clerks' handwriting, and then in type. And underneath it, in the same file, my own permit, 2019. Service upgrade, 100 amps to 200. Applicant, my name. Final inspection signed by a county inspector on a Thursday in August. I stood at that counter and looked at my own handwriting from 7 years ago, and it was not triumph. It felt like finding out the fire extinguisher had been on the wall the whole time. I had done the boring thing in 2019 for a reason that had nothing to do with this. 100 amps to 200. It went into a drawer at the county, and nobody who opened a door or did not open one could edit it afterward. It did not care what my mother told the brokerage. It was just sitting there being true. That night, I went out to my own driveway with a flashlight. I knelt on cold concrete with my coat folded under my knees. I photographed 3 meters from 4 feet back, so that all 3 were in one frame with the address plate. The middle one was turning. The middle one is the back unit. It was turning because an 81-year-old woman had put her kettle on. That is the whole case, and it is smaller than the folder. I spent 6 days building 60 pages, and the 60 pages are not the point. A person can read 60 pages and argue with all of them. Nobody argues with 3 meters on a wall. 1 kitchen on the drawing, 3 meters on the wall. Anybody can count to 3. My sister came to my house that night with the copy, because our mother had asked her to, and because Marlena would rather hand you a document in person than let you request it from somebody else. She would not take her coat off. She put the listing agreement on my counter and turned it so it faced me, which is a salesman's habit she does not know she has. Seller, it said, on a line with a box around it, Vada Fennimore. And under the printed name, in the handwriting I have seen on 17 years of rent receipts and every birthday card I have ever gotten, my mother's signature, done carefully, the way she does it, with the loop in the R that takes her an extra second. 17 years of receipts, and 17 years of that sentence about financing. She had been writing both of them at the same table the whole time. She had not scrawled it. She had signed it the way you sign something you are proud to be signing. Above the signature, in a box of its own, the price, $262,975, typed in by somebody who had never once been through the door at the back of that kitchen. I asked my sister when she had known. She said, "Known what?" And then she saw my face and dropped it, and said, "I told her to get it listed, and I'd take it from there." I asked whether she had told the woman in the back to be out on Saturdays. She said yes, immediately, no pause at all, the way you answer a question about the weather. She said, "That's standard. You can't show around a tenant." She said, "I was nice about it. I gave her the times in writing so she'd have them." In writing. My sister gave an 81-year-old woman a written schedule of the hours she was not allowed to be in her own kitchen, and thought of it as a courtesy, and it was a courtesy, in the world where my sister works. I said, "She sits in the church lot," my sister said. She could sit anywhere. Then she picked up her keys and told me not to make this into a thing with Dad, because he does not need it, and the file would be closed either way. She was right that it would be closed. She was wrong about which way. Wednesday, I sat down at my own table with the record card, the permit, the 6 sign-in sheets, the listing, the drawing, and the trust. And I could not make myself start. Vada Fennimore was 9 years old, in a town 2 counties over, when a man put a paper on the door, and her mother's furniture went onto the grass. She has told that story maybe 6 times in my life, and never on purpose. There was a green Davenport, and it rained on it. Somebody from the church came for them at dark. She remembers what they ate. She has lived in 14 places, and she has never once had her name on a paper for any of them. Not one. Her father's name, then her husband's name, and then, at 70, her daughter's name. In 2019, I recorded a deed that put a building into a trust. That trust wrote out the future of 2 people by name. One of them was a tenant in the back, with no blood in her at all. My mother read that document at her own kitchen table, and her name was not anywhere in it. I knew that when I signed it. I told myself it was because she is my father's wife, and his room is her room. That is true. Here is the rest of it, and it is mine, not hers. I did not put her name in it because I did not want her to have a say. I had spent 10 years listening to a woman explain my building to my aunt, and when I finally had a piece of paper of my own, I made sure it was a room she could not come into. I told a lawyer in a strip mall it was for clarity. I know what a curb at 9 years old does to a person. I have watched it do it for 47 years, and she went and picked the one building in the world with an old woman asleep in the back of it. Understanding where a thing comes from is not the same as being willing to pay for it, and I was not willing. I did not sleep much that week, and Thursday, at 2 a.m, I wrote something. There is a neighborhood board online that everybody on Dorset Street reads, the kind of place where a lost dog gets found in 9 minutes. I wrote a post that said the duplex on Dorset is not for sale, and the woman showing it does not own it, and there is a tenant of 31 years living in the half they are calling storage. Every word of it was true. That is what made it good. I read it twice and deleted it. I also had a lawyer's name on a sticky note and a real option, file an action in court to clear the title. Name my mother and my sister as defendants on a public docket. with a case number anybody in this county can look up. Both of them work. Both of them put my father's address somewhere strangers can read it, and he still has to live at that address afterward. That is the reason. It is not forgiveness. My father knocks twice on a wall at 1 o'clock on Saturday, and I was not going to be the reason a man at the hardware store knew his business. I called Eustace on Friday. Eustace is the framer I have worked beside for 11 years, on maybe 200 houses. He has cut keys for me twice and never once asked why. When I told him about the lockbox on the Tuesday, he said, "Tell me what we're doing," which is the correct thing for a friend to say, and he said it without being taught. Friday, I asked him to come stand in the driveway with me on Saturday, so that when the agents came, there would be 2 people there instead of 1. There was a long pause on that phone. Then he said, "It's your mother's name on that mailbox, Vada. Nobody's going to want to stand in the middle of that." I said I understood. I did understand. That is the worst part of it. I understood him completely. I hung up and sat in my truck outside a hardware store and cried about 11 years of houses for about 90 seconds. Then I wiped my face on my sleeve and went in and bought a box of screws for something else entirely. A week like that tells you which of the people around you are beams and which ones are trim. I stood in that driveway on the Saturday anyway, by myself, from noon until 2. One car slowed down at the curb and kept going. Mrs. Silverthorne stayed in her own kitchen with her radio on, because I had asked her to and because she does what she is asked. At 1:10 my father knocked twice, and she knocked twice back, and I stood on cold concrete under 3 meters and listened to 2 old people agree about tomatoes through a wall built in 1926. That is the sound I went downtown with. So on Monday morning, I drove downtown by myself with the field box on the passenger seat, and I did not go to the police station. I had the number in my phone. I looked at it, at a red light. The police would have taken my mother. That is what that door does. Somebody would have come to Dorset Street in a car with a light bar and knocked on the front door of a house where a 78-year-old man was making oatmeal. My mother would have been the story on that street until she died, and 1 o'clock on Saturday still would not have belonged to Mrs. Silverthorne. I did not want my mother taken. I wanted the building described correctly. Those are different errands, and only one of them was mine. The Denbigh County Recorder is in the basement of the courthouse. It smells like toner and radiator dust. Every room I have been in that smelled like that was full of things built to outlive everybody standing in it. 4 windows, a rack of blank forms, a copier that takes quarters. Window 3. The deputy recorder at window 3 is Queenie Treadwell. 22 years at that counter, reading glasses on a chain, a rubber stamp with the minutes on it. She is the least impressed woman I have ever stood in front of. I put the field box on the counter and hit the latch with my thumb the way you have to. I had 2 documents in it. Neither was clever. The first was a memorandum of trust. That is 1 page. It does not tell the world your business, it names the trust, names me as trustee, and puts the one restriction where anybody looking at the building has to read it. I wrote it in plain words. I have spent my whole working life writing for somebody who was not in the room, and I was not going to start dressing it up on the 1 page that mattered. The second was a 2-paragraph notice saying who lives in that building, front and back, by unit, and since when. That is the entire weapon. 1 page and 2 paragraphs. $10 a page, cash or check, no appointment. The deputy recorder read the 1 page the way a woman reads something she has read 4,000 times, which is fast and then slow in exactly 1 place. She stopped. Then she read that part out loud because she was indexing it, and that is how she works. "This building may not be handed to a buyer empty," she read, "for as long as either of the 2 people named in it is alive." Then she read the second half again, by itself, the way you check a figure you have already added twice. "For as long as either of the 2 people named in it is alive." 7 years that sentence had been sitting in a drawer at my house, and that was the first time anybody had said it out loud, in a room with another person in it. She looked up over the reading glasses. She asked how many homes the notice was describing. 2, I said. Front and back. She wrote that down. Then she asked me something that is not on any form, in the voice of a woman who has watched people come to that counter for 22 years. She asked how you prove a thing like that. I told her to go and stand in the driveway of my building and look at the wall at shoulder height. There are 3 meters, I said. 1 for the front, 1 for the back, 1 little one for the porch light. The drawing they priced has 1 kitchen on it. She asked for the square footage off the county's card. 1940, I said. And she wrote it down with no expression at all. The way you write down a shoe size. She asked for the parcel number and I read it off the card. She asked whether I was the trustee. I said I was, and she said, then your name goes on top, and she turned the receipt around and showed me where it would print. Then she stamped it. It is a heavy stamp and it makes a sound like a stapler in a gymnasium. And what it puts on the page is the day and the hour and the minute. 9:41 in the morning. She slid the receipt across the counter and said, indexed against the parcel. It'll show in the search from this afternoon. $10 a page, $20. And do you want conformed copies mailed? I said yes. I gave her 3 addresses, mine, the building, and the brokerage. That was all of it. A woman in reading glasses read 1 sentence out loud in a basement, stamped the minute on it, and asked whether I wanted copies mailed. I picked up the field box off that counter and my hands were shaking and hers were not, because for her, it was Monday. I did not do one thing after that. Everything that happened next happened without me, and that is the whole shape of it. Tuesday afternoon, a woman I have never met ran a search on that address, the way she runs one on every address, for a fee, without knowing a single name in this story. My 1 page came up under it, dated the day before at 9:41 in the morning. She telephoned the brokerage. That is her whole part in this, and it took her about 4 minutes. Wednesday, I was at Dorset Street, putting a hinge screw back into my father's storm door, when a gray sedan came up the street slow and stopped at the curb. A man got out with a folder under his arm. 50s, good coat, no tie. He did not go up to the porch. He went straight down the driveway, the way a man walks when somebody has told him something on the telephone that he does not believe. He stopped at the wall, at shoulder height. I watched him count them. He did it with his chin first, the way you count when you would rather not be seen counting, and then he did it again with 1 finger, because the first time had not settled it. He turned and saw me on the steps with a screwdriver in my hand and took me for a contractor, which I have been taken for on that porch twice now. He asked whether the back was a separate unit. I said yes. I said, it has its own kitchen and its own bath, and a woman in it who has lived there 31 years, and that the county has had the building down as 1,940 square feet since 1926. I said it in the voice I use on the telephone when somebody wants to know what I found in a crawl space. He said, well, that's that, the way you say it about weather. Then he tapped the folder twice against his leg, walked back up the driveway past 3 meters, and got in the car. That is what a recorded page looks like when it finally does something. It looks like a man in a good coat, counting to 3 on his own fingers in my driveway, and then driving away. He never asked my name. My father waved at the car out of politeness. The listing agent called an hour later. She said, I have your recording. She said the file was closed, and that she was sorry, and there was a silence I did not fill for her. Before dark, a young man from the brokerage drove out to Dorset Street. He took the lockbox off the handrail with a key on a ring. He unscrewed the plastic flyer box off my porch post. He put both of them in the trunk of a small car and drove off. 15 days. 4 screw holes in a post, and my father standing in the doorway in his robe, watching a stranger take something off his house, which is what he had been watching all month. The cash buyer's deal died on paper the way things die on paper, which is that nobody announces it. Whatever my sister was going to be paid for standing in the middle of it, she was not paid it. I do not know the number, and I am not going to make one up. She has never told me, and I have never asked. That is the whole of her punishment, and it is smaller than what she did. There is a bill, too. My mother owes the brokerage $140 for the photographs and the sign in the yard on a listing that was canceled. It came in a windowed envelope. She has it on the refrigerator under a magnet shaped like a peach, and I have not asked her why she leaves it there. The conformed copies came in Thursday's mail, which is how she found out. I was there when it came, on purpose, because I was not going to let a document I recorded be the thing that walked into that kitchen alone. She opened it at her own table. She read the first page. She turned it over and read the back, which is blank, and turned it back, which is what people do when a thing is shorter than they expected. Then she said, "You went down to the courthouse and filed paper against your own mother." I did not answer her. There is no answer. That sentence is not asking anything. She said it again, differently, the way you go around a house looking for an unlocked window, against your own mother, Vada, down at the courthouse, where anybody can see it. She was right that anybody can see it. That is the entire purpose of a recorder's office, and it is the reason I went there. She said, nobody was being put out. And that time she was right, and that is the joke that is not funny. Nobody is being put out. That is now a sentence somebody stamped the minute on. It is filed against that address, and it will be read by every stranger who ever looks at that building after both of us are dead. She did not apologize. She said, "I'm sorry it got to this." I put the envelope back down on her table and went out and stood on the porch and looked at 4 screw holes in a post until my ears stopped ringing. Then she said the other thing, the one from 2009, and her voice had gone thin. "Your name is on it for financing." 17 years. She has said that sentence at that table for 17 years. To my aunt, to the neighbors, to a woman at a brokerage with a folder of receipts in her hand. And I finally understood that she was not lying to any of them. She had said it until it was furniture. You do not lie to yourself about the couch. My sister called that night and gave me the version where I am the problem. She said I had blown up a clean deal over a technicality, and that the old woman would have been relocated, and that nobody was being put out. There it was again, out of a second mouth, and that is when I finally heard what the sentence actually is. It is not a promise, it is a request. It is somebody asking you to agree that a thing is not happening while it happens. I asked her what relocated meant. She said, "There are places." I asked her to name one. She said, "Don't be like this." Then she said the sentence I will be hearing for a while. It shows better, empty. She was not being cruel, and that is what I cannot put down. It shows better, empty is a true sentence in her business. She has said it about 40 houses. It becomes what it is when one of them has a woman in it who knocks twice on a wall. You cannot sell a building by describing a smaller one. Prudence said that to me over a space heater, with the drawing turned around under her fingers, and I have said it to myself about 9 times since. All of it landed smaller than you would think. The building is still mine. It is still in the trust, and now the trust's one sentence sits in the chain where the next title examiner has to read it. Not a lawsuit, not a courtroom. There is no case number in this county with my mother's name on it, and I did not go downtown to get her one. Nobody ever paid $262,975 for anything. That number never bought a thing. It only had to be believed for 5 weeks, and it nearly was. When somebody buys that building someday, they will buy it with 2 people's rooms attached, and if that makes it worth less, then it makes it worth less. The assignment contract was never rescinded. That is the account I left open on purpose. The company still owns a piece of paper that says it may buy a building nobody is selling, and a man from that company still calls the front unit on Tuesdays and asks for the seller by her first name. My father still says, "She's out." I was there for one of them. It was a Tuesday in May. I was putting a new washer in his kitchen faucet with my head under the sink. The phone on the wall rang. He got up with his hip and answered it the way he answers, with the whole word, "Hello." Then he said, "She's out." Then he said, "No, I couldn't tell you." Then he said, "All right," and hung up, and came back and sat down and told me it was the fella about the house, and asked if I wanted the little wrench. He has been saying it since March, and it has become the thing you say when that phone rings. He has never once asked me what the fellow wants. He is 78, and he has made a small, quiet arrangement with himself the way people do. My mother was in the next room when it rang. She heard him say it. She sits 11 feet from that phone every Tuesday and lets a 78-year-old man cover for her, and she has never picked it up herself. I have not had that number changed. I get as far as the phone company's menu and hang up, because that ringing is the only thing left in this story that still tells the truth about what my family did. Mrs. Silverthorne came out of the back unit on the Thursday with a Bible with a rubber band around it and took out a letter I sent her in 2019, which I had entirely forgotten writing. 1 page. It says her rooms are hers as long as she wants them, and it explains the trust in language a person can read, and it is signed by me. She had kept it folded flat in the back of that Bible for 7 years. She said, "I knew it was in here. I didn't want to bring it out and seem like I didn't trust you." An 81-year-old woman sat in a cold car in a church parking lot rather than seem like a woman who did not trust us. I put my hand over hers on that table, and neither of us said anything for a bit, and the kettle did the talking. The flyer is still folded into eighths in the front pocket of my inspection bag, next to the moisture meter. I did not put it in the field box. I keep true paper in the field box, and that flyer is not true paper, and I am not going to have it in with the other. It has gone soft at the folds the way paper does when it lives in a pocket, and when I reach past it for the meter, I feel it, which is the point. 2 Saturdays after the lockbox came off, I went by at 1:45 with a bag of sandwiches. What I have now is not a victory, it is a standing appointment. At 1 o'clock on Saturdays, we sit on the porch, all 3 of us, if it is over 50 degrees, and inside, if it is not. My father brings the radio out and puts it on the rail. Mrs. Silverthorne comes around from the back with a folding chair she will not let me carry and a tin of the shortbread she makes badly, and I bring lunch. My mother comes out sometimes, and sometimes she does not, and when she does, she sits at the end, and she is quiet, and nobody asks her to be anything, and nobody has said the word sorry in either direction. The bag my father packed went back in the closet in April. He did not say anything about it, and neither did I. And one day, the shaving things were in the bathroom again. The gardening program is still on. The host is still wrong about tomatoes. And when he is, Mrs. Silverthorne knocks twice on the arm of her chair, and my father knocks twice back on the rail, and they do not look at each other while they do it. 31 years and 1 hour. And now the hour has 3 people in it and a plate. 1 o'clock on Saturday. 1,940 square feet, all of it lived in, none of it storage. That is what I got. Not a courtroom, not an apology, not my mother's face when she understood. An hour on a Saturday that nobody can schedule showings over, because there is a sentence in a basement with the minute stamped on it. You cannot sell a building by describing a smaller one. Somebody in your family has a description of you that leaves out the back half. They are not always lying. Most of them only ever came in the front door. Go and stand in your own driveway and count. That's my story. 3 meters on a driveway wall, 1 word on a flyer in a plastic box 11 feet from my father's chair, and 1 hour on a Saturday that is back on the calendar. Somebody you love is living somewhere on a handshake. A parent in a back unit. A widow in a mother-in-law apartment. An aunt in the little house behind the big one. Go and look at whose name is on the paper this week. Then ask out loud what happens to them if the person on the paper dies first. It costs nothing to look, and it is not a rude question. It is the kindest question there is. If you know a woman who found out her own house was for sale from a sign on her own lawn, send this to her tonight, and tell me in the comments what your family calls the thing you paid for. Mine called it financing. Then hit subscribe, because there are 3 meters on the wall of every one of these stories, and most people never walk down the driveway. That's all of it. Thank you for sitting with me on the porch tonight. I'll see you in the next one.